Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program First Contract. Now this is episode 14, and in this episode we are going to look at putting a satellite into orbit. And the contract that we have today is to build a new unmanned probe and to put it in orbit around Kerbin in these very specific conditions. So 12 million meters for apopsis, 10 million meters for periapsis, and that's actually quite a long way. That's the orbit of the Mun. So this is going to be quite a deep space satellite orbiting Kerbin, as far as Kerbin goes anyway. It will have a slight inclination from an equatorial orbit, not too much. And this item here, we'll see how that plays out once we've got our satellite into orbit. Now, in order to complete the contract, we obviously need to build the probe. We need to reach the designated orbit with a deviation of less than 7%. That's actually quite a wide band, really. And when we reach our designated orbit, we basically just need to take our hands off the controls for 10 seconds in order for the contract to be marked as complete. Now, we're not going to get a great reward for this. We're going to get an advance of 12,000 funds. We'll be paid 65,000 funds on completion and a tiny amount of science. And of course, we will receive a small penalisation if we fail. Now, the good thing about this sort of contract is it will come up quite a few times. And here's another example to position a satellite in a perfectly equatorial orbit around Minmus. So we will have opportunities to earn much more funds and much more science by placing satellites in more challenging locations. So to begin with, let's practice in the safety of a Kerbin orbit. So we will accept this contract and head on over to the VAB to build our satellite. I'll see you there. Welcome to the VAB. Here we are as usual. So let's get ourselves a simple probe body, which will be the beginnings of our satellite. Now, you'll remember from the previous episode, we had decided to implement a few new parts, a few new mods. Gene, in his wisdom, thought we ought to employ the Karbonite scanning system, which is part of the modular colonization system, because we're going to need to be able to manufacture fuels. So let's put the Karbonite scanner here on the top of our satellite. Nice little device, and we should be able to find ourselves carbonite deposits with that. Now, of course, we'll need a battery to keep our system running when it's on the dark side. Yeah, the dark side. And now let us get ourselves our propulsion system. I think that adapter is rather large for our purposes. So let's just try putting on a small engine on a small fuel tank. Let's just tap that on there. Not very neat, but it'll do. Let's put on a nice efficient engine. That's probably one of the more efficient engines we're going to get for liquid fuel. And now we need to start fitting this out with various accessories. So let's start with our flight engineer so we know how well we're doing. We'll just take one of those, and you can see we're already up to our 4,000 meters per second. So that ought to actually get us into a basic orbit, but obviously we are going to need a bit more than that to reach our higher level specifics. So we've got to get up to 12 million meters, so that's going to need quite a bit, but let's worry about that later. Let's get our basics on. Let's put ourselves a transmitter, because we're going to need to transmit some data from this device. Roleplay. Next, what do we need? We need some of our typical utility panels. Now you notice we've got quite a lot in here now as far as parts goes. We've got the large containers for food and other resources where we won't be needing those. And we've also got the Kerbal attachment system, which is going to be quite handy when we're building bases so we can refuel things, that kind of stuff, ad hoc connections. But we don't need to worry about that again today. We just need to hunt down our panels. So we'll get 2 of those panels. Let's just put 2 on there for symmetry. Good point. We need symmetry with our transmitter there. There we go, transmitter. Got battery to power the transmitter. We've got 2 panels. And what else? Let's see. Here's some of the Karbonite supplies. So when we're building spaceships that are going to refuel or mine Karbonite, we'll be using some of these. We've got some of our base station parts. So we've actually got quite a lot of parts to choose from when it comes to building bases, because that again is another type of contract we could be getting ourselves. So lots of parts to play with, but we need to concentrate. We must concentrate. So we've got some panels there in order to make sure we are well charged. So I think that is just about everything we need for the satellite itself. So we need to get the satellite into orbit. So let's get ourselves a separator and let's build ourselves our lower stages. So what should we have in our lower stage? Let's get ourselves our directional stage. Here we go. Got our vectoring LVT 45 engine on the bottom there. Let's get that into oh no, that's the wrong stage. We want to put that there, get the staging right. Make sure we've got the right engine. Yes, we have. That's good. Now let us go to here and get ourselves our separators, or rather our decouplers, 2 of those, and build our ascent stage out a little. So let's get fuel tanks. Yep, fuel tanks. Get some fuel flow. Let's have a look. Fuel flow. There we go. Get that flowing into the central stage. Our asparagus staging. LVT 30s for our main ascent. Our good old fins. Not that they do a great deal of difference, but we'll put them on anyway. Let's get 4 of those. And our launch stabilizers. Oh, we don't want 4. 2 will be plenty there. And there. Oops. There we go. Get those again. Let's get everything into the right stage. And I think that's our main engine. Okay, that's fine. Now we don't have enough fuel. 3.9's not enough really. 3.9's not enough. We could do quite a lot with that because we've got quite a bit in this final stage, but I like overkill. We're doing fine on the money, and of course we did get that enormous payout from one of our previous contracts. So let us go for overkill. Let's put on another whopping stage onto here, and let us get some struts just to make sure this thing doesn't peel off as we ascend. So there we go. Overkill, but what the heck. Let's just bring this down to ground level and just check it out. So we got way plenty enough delta V, but remember we do have to get into quite a high orbit. So I think we're probably going to be using it all. Yep, I think we're going to be using it all. Let's just check. We've got some panels. Let's just put a couple of extra panels on at 90 degrees. Let's put those in there. So we've got 4 panels pointing in each direction. We don't need any lights, we don't need parachutes, not coming back down. So that all looks good. We've got our stage, we've got our asparagus pipes in. We've got everything here in the right stages. Yes, that all looks good. So let us name this. Now this is going to be our Karbonite satellite Mark 1. So let's save that and let's go on out to the launch pad and see if we can satisfy our contract. I'll see you there in a moment. Once again, we find ourselves on the launch pad, this time for an early morning launch. So let's open up our contract window and just double check the conditions. Now it's going to be a very, very high orbit. It's actually 11 million meters is the orbit of the Mun. So this is going to be pretty hefty work for us to do. So let's get the SAS on. Let's get throttle up and let us get into the sky. Now this is going to be initially quite a standard ascent, but we do have to get that very high orbit. So what I think I am going to do is I am basically, instead of just topping out at 80 or 100 kilometers, I am just going to keep going. Now we can see our little Karbonite scanner working on the top there, and we'll have a look at how that works a little bit later into the flight. In the meantime, we just need to do our usual, which is to keep an eye on when our first booster stage runs out of fuel. And obviously when we get up to about 7 or 8 kilometers, we'll start our gravity turn and then just, like I say, keep going until our main stage has run out of fuel. And then from then on, it's just a matter of meeting up with the orbits that our contract requires, and we'll see how to do that in map mode in just a few seconds. So let's just keep an eye on our initial stage. Won't be long now. We can see the delta V rapidly dropping in that stage, so we've got about 10 seconds to go. Nice shot of us there heading off towards the east. There goes the stage and away it goes. Now the first condition we have to meet, or is easy to meet, is an inclination of 3 degrees. So if we just lift our trajectory just off that 90-degree line, we can see our inclination heading up towards 3 degrees. Now 3 degrees is hardly here nor there. But if you had a contract that wanted you to go 90 degrees, clearly you'd want to launch up towards the north, and 180, you'd actually want to launch completely the opposite direction towards the west. And that will of course save you a heck of a lot of delta V if you do that as part of the launch instead of trying to adjust it later on. So 2.5 degrees, that's near enough for the time being. Now while we'll ascend, let's just have a look at the map mode, because in map mode the orbit we're required to achieve is shown here as the yellow line. Now if we'd wanted to be perfect with our change in inclination, then we really should have tried, just like when you're aligning with rendezvous, to use the ascending and descending nodes. They're not really visible here, but if we'd accelerated time and just eyeballed where the equator crossed the orbit that we're being shown, that would have been perfect. But this'll do. This'll do. Let's just double check how we're doing. We're still heading upwards. Let's go out of map mode. There we go. We can drop that stage, run out of fuel, and just finish off with this stage. Now one of the good things about just running your final stage for a few seconds is it gives the game engine an opportunity to work out what the actual thrust of your engine is going to be. So when you add a maneuver, it'll be able to get the estimated burn right. So let's start by increasing our orbit in this direction to meet up with this orbit, which is going to be 10 and that's 12, so here's going to be about 11 something. So let's just try and get 11 something, close enough. Now when you're meeting up with these kinds of orbit, it is just a case of adjust a bit here, adjust a bit there, so on and so on and so on until you meet up with the final orbit. Now, like I was saying a few seconds earlier, if we'd matched up our inclination with what is effectively the ascending or descending node of our target orbit, then our inclination change would have been much less. Now, it looks like we're probably about 90 degrees off. So we are going to have to make a fairly hefty inclination change once we've got the orbit picked off. Now in game time we've got 1 hour and 13 minutes before we make an estimated burn of 43 seconds, 794 meters per second, and as you can see our satellite has got plenty of delta V. So let's just warp time forward until about 25 or so seconds, and that's when we will start our throttle up for this first orbital change. Time is rapidly advancing. I don't want to go over the top with this. I mean, because we're going to be adjusting and adjusting and adjusting, it doesn't need to be that accurate, but I'm one of those picky people who likes to get it accurate first time, which is why I'm a little bit disappointed I was a little bit off with making my inclination change. I should have concentrated at that point, but let's concentrate now. So let's bring time warp down a little. And let's throttle up. I missed it a little bit, but we can adjust that out at a later date. There we go. We can now actually see our ascending and descending nodes. And those are where we are going to have to rotate our craft to meet what is a slight angle. A slight angle on our contracted orbit. But we're coming down now to almost the end of our burn. There we go. That's fine. Ooh, I think we may have rather overdone that. Yes. Okay, well, don't do like I do. Do as I say, or whatever the phrase is. So we are going to have to make another adjustment. So, whoops, don't know what happened there. Let's make another adjustment and adjust the orbit out. Now there you saw we had a bit of an encounter with the Mun, because as you can see from the orbit, this is very similar to the Mun. So what have we got? 12 there, 11. It's coming in a bit, so 11, that should be fine. So again, now we've got a day and 5 hours, almost 2 Kerbin days, but for a very tiny estimated burn, which just demonstrates the further you are out, the slower you're going, the bigger the effect. So again, let us time warp forward until our craft reaches this point. Now we're going to have to bring this part of the orbit in as part of our next adjustment, but again, adjust, 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 and you will eventually get these orbital contracts right. So let's keep going up with the time warp and keep an eye on our time. Here's our craft coming around. There's the Mun passing by underneath our node. And here we are about to break. There we go. Under a day to go. 4 hours and 30. 4 hours. Ship's going slower and slower and slower as it reaches the furthest point on its orbit. So let's bring the time warp down again as we go under the hour. So 40 minutes to go, and the ship's going slower still. So we'll go on about the 3 or 4 seconds. So we've got quite a way to go, but we don't want to overshoot it again. So let's concentrate. So bring time warp down to 50. Down to 10. One minute. Down to 5. 30 seconds to go. So we're going to be going on the 3. Let's make sure we're all lined up. Whoops. And we're going to miss it again. Still, it's only a 6-second burn. Let's get ourselves lined up. So we want this to go out to, oh, there's our encounter, to about 11. There we go. That should be fine. Now we've got to start making our final adjustments. So, first things first. So, let us match up our orbits a little bit better by adding a maneuver here in order to sort out this inclination change. Now, if this had been like 90 degrees, we'd be using up humongous amounts of delta V, which is why trying to get your plane change started when you actually do the launch, which we should have done a little bit more carefully, would have saved us quite a bit of this bit of delta V. But let's just level ourselves out. Does that look all right? No, I think we need to come down a little bit more. Not much. Oops. Just a little bit more. Now, of course, we've got a 7% deviation, so that's quite a bit that we've got to play with. But let's get ourselves sorted out. Now, we could actually, seeing as we're on this part of the orbit, could actually do it over here, save a little bit of time. So let's do that on the other side of the orbit. There we go. That looks pretty good if I don't say so myself. So that's in 5 hours. That's almost in 1 Kerbin day, another 48 delta V, only 2 seconds. Now, so we don't miss our opportunity again, let's get ourselves lined up. There we are. So let's advance the time warp, and here we can see time rushing by, and again go up to 100, and we'll go on the 2 or 3 when this eventually gets down. Let's be a little bit more adventurous with the time warp. So that's 100, factor of 100. Skip up a little more. Down to 50. And we can see our satellite approaching the maneuver node. 40 minutes to go. 38. Let's quickly tick it up and then rapidly tick it back down again. 19, 15, 10, start coming down, factor 50, 10. So we've got just under 3 minutes. We're still lined up on the target, the blue reticle. Maneuver nodes reticle. Down to 5. And let's come all the way down. Right, so we're all lined up. And here we go. Just nice and gentle. There we go. Almost perfect. Let's have a look. How are we lined up? That's going to be within 7%, I think. So that's good. So now all we need to do is adjust our orbit, which, due to the earlier little mistakey poo, we didn't do very well on. So this is where we are worst off. So which shall we do first? Let us just push out our orbit here and then we'll pull in. Let's do that. So let's push this out. This has got to be at about 12.2 and we're at 11.5 at the moment. 12. Now if we use these we should be able to swing it round. And out a little. And a little bit more. There we go. That looks good. That seems to have that set. And when that's right, we can then pull in this apoapsis. And we're done. So, I did it again, didn't I? I've done it on the wrong side. We should be doing this one first because we're going this way. Duh. Right, so let's do this one then, shall we? Oops, because the mun's round here. Actually, this will be quite fun. We'll be pretty near the mun. Might even have a quick look at the mun while we're at it. So we're going to be pulling back in to meet our orbit, and then we're going to be... Is it that way? No, let's go this way round. And get the periapses. Periapsi, is it periapsi? Get them lined up. There's going to be 10.7 and 10.4, so we need to come back a little. There we go. They are almost perfectly lined up. That'll be within 7%, I suspect. There we go. So let us plod our way around to another 32 meters per second. I mean, we've got shed loads of delta V, shed loads. So we've got a day and a bit. So again, let's speed up time. Oh no, well no. First, let's not make that mistake again. Let's go and line ourselves up with our reticule so that we don't miss our reticule. There we go. And let's speed up time again. There's the mun racing away. We should be able to see that in the distance a bit later. Let's not overdo the time warping. Down to 100. Up again. And down. Now the estimated burn is trivial, which again, if the further you are out on your orbit, the slower you're going, the less delta V you need to make a much more significant difference. So this is going to be fairly efficient with our already quite efficient engine. And it's a tiny craft as well, so it doesn't take much to shift it about. 10 minutes. Drop down to time warp of 50, and we're pretty much going on the dot. There we go. So let's just make sure we are all lined up. We might as well have a look at our craft. There's our craft. Marvellous. Let's get ready to go. There's Kerbin, and there's the mun further around on its orbit. Very similar to ours. There we go. So 18 seconds to go. We are pretty much lined up. Let's just pop that out of the way. We can see our electric charge. That's always the thing that tends to run out when you go on the dark side of the planet. So beware of that. And let's just kick off that very gently. There we go. Let's go back to map view and just double check. There we go. Nicely in position there, and all we need to do now is whip across here and just pull in apoapsis. So this needs to be 11.6, which I think we should... we're even within 7% already, but I'm a perfectionist. So let's just pull... oh no, we're not pulling, we're pushing. Let's just push this out very slightly. There we go. And let's just do this one last manoeuvre to get it perfect. So, as before, this is a 3-day orbit. So let's whack up our time warp and see our satellite whiz round, chasing as it does the Mun. Here it comes, 2 hours. Notice as we make these smaller and smaller adjustments, the amount of delta V now is tiny. I mean, this estimated burn is well, not even worth counting. 47 minutes. Let's just speed up time for this last few little bits. And it looks like at some point in our orbit we actually took our fingers off the keys for long enough. That was probably during the time warp, the SAS, which effectively is a control you've got to take your fingers off. We would normally have had to turn that off in order to effectively have taken our hands off the keyboard, our hands off the controls, but it looks like time warp effectively does that for us. So we have technically already satisfied our contract. But like I say, I'm a perfectionist, so let's just do this one last tiny manoeuvre. 42 minutes to go. 41. 40? 30. 30, there we go. Come on, 30. 30 minutes. Now, there's another thing we're going to have a quick look at when we're finished doing this particular manoeuvre, which is the satellite itself and the sensor that we have on top of it. Now, to be fair, using the Karbonite sensor from the top of this particular satellite, this far away from Kerbin, isn't that useful. But we'll have a look at it anyway, since we did actually put it on the top for a purpose, other than satisfying the contract, which is the raison d'etre for this series. So we've got 22 minutes. Just pop up the time warp again. 18 minutes. 13. I don't know why I'm doing this manoeuvre, to be perfectly honest. Because having satisfied the contract, I can't actually see if I'm getting any closer to the intended distance. Because I can't see what the intended distance was anymore. Duh! So we'll call it quits. Off with his head, or in this case, the manoeuvre node. So, let's go back and have a look at our lovely jubbly satellite. As it is, wandering this far away in space from Kerbin, potentially crashing into the Mun at some point when our orbits collide. But let's just have a quick look at our satellite. Now let's just line this up just because a north-south alignment of satellites seems to be the way that things are done, since Mr. Manley pointed this out as part of his docking skills. Now you can see there on the top the Karbonite scanner nicely animated, but what can you do with it? Well, if you right click it, you get two functions. You get Start Resource Scan, which is part of the general ScanSat functionality, but you can also display Karbonite hotspots that are within range of the scanner. Now we are so far away from Kerbin, we're not going to see any there, but if we go to map mode, we can now see Karbonite hotspots scattered all over the face of Kerbin that is within the viewing distance of our satellite. So if we were to land, you'll notice these are all clustered around mountainous regions. If we were to land the appropriate craft anywhere near one of these hotspots, we would be able to fill our pockets, fill our boots with Karbonite. Now technically you can collect Karbonite anywhere, but these are the high concentrations. Now of course there's Karbonite on the Mun, there's Karbonite on Minmus, there's Karbonite everywhere. There's even Karbonite in gaseous atmospheres, which will make it fun collecting in aircraft, for example. So that's something we will come back to when we're making bases. In the meantime, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.